Welcome to another instalment of the pharmaphorum podcast. My name is Dominic Tyre, and I'm pharmaphorum's creative and editorial director. For episode 31, George Underwood, who's the editor of pharmaphorum's digital magazine Deep Dive, speaks to Guy Goldberg from RedHill biopharma about new ways to treat COVID. Guy is Chief Business Officer at RedHill and previously served at the specialty injectable drug development company Eagle Pharmaceuticals, and before that he was a member of the investment team at ProQuest Investments. Here he talks about the potential for new COVID-19 therapeutics to help fight the pandemic and treat patients in the years to come. He also shares his views on the factors that have caused COVID treatments to show mixed results so far, and why new COVID therapeutics are still so important, even as vaccines become available. You can find more details of this episode, including a download link for the podcast and information about other instalments in the series at pharmaphorum.com/podcast. The Pharmaphorum podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Acast, Stitcher and Podbean, where you can find and subscribe to it by searching for Pharmaphorum.
Hello, Guy. Thanks so much for joining us today on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on, and we're very interested to hear about RedHill's work on COVID-19 treatments.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
So to start off, if we cast our minds back to what feels like 10 years ago, but is actually only spring last year, it seemed medical headlines were dominated by news about COVID-19 therapeutics, but these drugs seem to have fallen out of the news a little compared to vaccines now. Can you speak to why these therapeutics are still important, even when we do have a vaccine?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a very important point. Vaccines have had success, and we're, of course, all thrilled about that. But unfortunately, the problem isn't going away. In fact, the CEO of Moderna, which is one of the leading COVID-19 vaccine makers, said specifically just a while ago that unfortunately the virus is here and is going to stay with the world forever. And in fact, public health officials, infectious disease experts, everyone is talking about COVID-19 becoming an endemic disease, meaning it's going to be something that we have to deal with as a society, as a global community now going forward. The reason for that is the vaccine is very widespread. It's mutating. And we don't even know with the vaccines whether they stop the virus or they just stop the symptoms. You see record cases in the U.S., record cases across Europe and the world, and there's questions also on durability of these vaccines. How long do they last? We don't know the answer to these questions. In our rush to get the vaccines approved and out there to people, rightly so, there's still many questions left unanswered. And unfortunately, as we have had success, we have not seen the same success in terms of therapeutics, which is why it is so important that that is not neglected and, in fact, is a focus for everybody from public health officials to companies to physicians, which it is anyway, given the huge infection rate and hospitalization rate that we see right now.
And as you say, there have been a few ups and downs of existing COVID therapeutics and some back and forth on how effective some of them might really be. What would you say have been the biggest challenges in developing truly effective treatments so far?
The big challenge is time, I think. That's how I see it. We don't have time. If you look at the fact that just from where we are to a year ago, we've expected and demanded from the pharma companies of the world to produce vaccines and to produce treatments, and that's a tough thing to do in given how drugs are developed, which they're done stepwise in terms of getting preclinical data and clinical data and discussions with regulatories and validating the data. It's all something that takes time, which we don't have. So I think time has been the biggest challenge in getting the right approach and keeping up with the evolving understanding of the virus, which is we start off with zero, and it's still there's a lot about this virus that we don't know. So I think that's been the biggest challenge for anybody working in this space.
Could you take us through a few of the different treatment approaches that have been used so far, and perhaps some of the upsides and downsides of each of them?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it's a very short list of products that have received even emergency use authorization, and the reason is that the data that's come out from the studies involving these products has been mixed at best. If you look at the four that people talk about the most, remdesivir, Lilly, Regeneron, and dexamethasone. Dexamethasone seems to work modestly. It's of course a very simple old oral steroid. The ones that are talked about more in terms of remdesivir, Lilly, Regeneron, those products don't seem to work that well. The WHO had some very big work that it did, saying, and its conclusion was that remdesivir showed little to no effect in the real world in clinical study setting. The NIH and the Infectious Disease Society of America have come out against the use of both Lilly's products and Gilead's product because of some of that work and other work. And even the head of the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine has said that he doesn't believe that remdesivir should be used as a routine treatment for COVID patients in the critical care ward. So there's a lot of concern about whether these things are working. We know also convalescent plasma has a very mixed record. And again, this goes back to the time question. We don't have enough time to do all the clinical development and the long pathways for clinical development that you typically do for drug development. So you do some work and you make a course correction based on the data, and you do more work and you make another course correction, and that's kind of how we've been operating. But the result is that we have several widely used drugs with a mixed record of success, and there's absolutely a need for a new drug that will have more dramatic and more sustained success in a clinical setting and a real world setting. So that's what we hope to do with our product opaganib, and we're working very hard on that.
So yeah, you guys are taking a dual mechanism approach to COVID treatment, I believe. So what advantages does that approach have?
Yeah, so the two main processes that are thought to drive how COVID-19 works are, first, in the early course of infection, that the disease is primarily driven by the replication of the virus and the respiratory, the acute respiratory syndrome of the virus. Later in the course of the disease, it's thought that the disease is more driven by the exaggerated immune response, which causes the virus to have tissue damage and work on various organs. So I think that what we're doing different is that we have a dual mechanism of action in opaganib, and that we target both the anti-inflammatory and the antiviral component of this disease, so both the cause and the effect. And I think what you see with something like remdesivir, which is a broad spectrum antiviral, or Lilly's product, which also works on blocking the viral attachment and entry to human cells, is a very focused way of treating the disease. I believe that by working on both mechanisms of action, the cause and the effect, the way that the disease spreads and the way the disease causes damage, that we'll be able to have a very unique effect, and we'll have some unique advantages for our product. So we're very excited about that. Where we are right now is we're in the middle of a phase 2-3 study, a global study being done in several countries in the world, including the UK. And we're very excited to see the readout of that study.
And of course, resistance from virus mutations is obviously always a concern here. Are there any ways in which you're trying to mitigate against that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's another very big important advantage of our product, and that is, and you see a lot of people talking about this also, is that with these variations and with these strains, the South African strain, the UK strain, others of Brazil, there is concern that the monoclonal antibodies, which are the Lilly products and the Gilead products I've talked about, what little possible effect that they might have might be completely obviated by these strains and future mutations. One of our big advantages, opaganib's big advantages, is that it doesn't work directly on the virus. it works on the host. In other words, it works on the body. And by doing that, we're able to cast a much wider net of efficacy, a much wider net to make sure the drug works. And we hope by doing that, we'll be able to capture and work with all these resistant strains that we see emerging. So we think that's a big advantage of opaganib, and one that will get a lot of attention, especially if our data that's coming out is very good. It means that we have a drug that isn't just effective now, but could be effective well into the future, as we see with the current strains and more strains, more and more challenges.
The drug is also, it's an orally administered tablet, I believe. So
yeah,
any particular advantages when it comes?
Yeah, it's a huge advantage. You see a lot of people talking in the U.S. of the fact that, so remdesivir, so all these products that I mentioned, remdesivir, Lilly's products, Regeneron's products, these are all drugs that are given in a hospital setting in an injectable format, and that has caused distribution challenges for a lot of these hospitals. And that's why you see a lot of reports that the government has spent, U.S. government spent billions of dollars to purchase supplies, and a small percentage has actually been used. And that's because the hospitals just don't have the capacity to use these formats. We have an oral pill, which is as simple as you get in the drug world. So it could be widely used. It overcomes these distribution and administration challenges. And we think that could be another very big advantage in terms of getting this drug out there into the hands of the people who need it.
I'm interested to know if there are any lessons from RedHill's previous work on other disease areas. You guys are specializing in gastrointestinal and infectious diseases in the past. Any other therapies that you've worked on? Any lessons from those you're drawing into your COVID drug development?
Yeah, so a good example of an analogy is our product for H. pylori infection, Talicia. This is a product that we developed in-house. We conducted 2 successful phase 3 studies, submitted it to the FDA, and got it approved on time in 6 months with really no major clinical questions. The reason we're able to do that, and we bring that same skill set and work ethic to this program, is laser focus on the study, on getting the patients in, on execution, making sure the studies are done to the highest standards, and making sure that we run. We don't slow down for a second. We keep in mind that we have a phrase, the patient is waiting. And when you're in clinical study mode, you really have to run and work as hard as you can to make sure your study finishes on time and you get the product or your drug into the hands of those who most need it.
I suppose that links back to what we were discussing earlier about time being a factor in successful failure of previous COVID treatments. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys are having to deal with that, in particular, the sort of time pressure?
Yeah, well, we have a team that really from, I think, February, March has been working around the clock. We have a dedicated team doing that. And we work weekends, we work days and nights, and we don't stop because we realize that the time sensitivity here means that every day counts, every patient counts, and we're doing everything that is possible to be as fast as we can to get the results, talk to FDA, and figure out how we get this product out there. Another thing that we're doing on the manufacturing side is we're not waiting to get emergency use authorization to begin manufacturing. So we're doing a lot of the manufacturing work in parallel so that if we are able to get an approval, we have supplies available and can start making that available to patients as soon as possible. So working in parallel, working around the clock, and working hard is the core things we've learned about how to do this well.
And I would assume that it's probably the fastest development time you've ever had.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've gone from in under a year to being within reach of a discussion with FDA around emergency use authorization. So absolutely fast turnaround. And the good thing for us is we have, as a company, we have a commercial infrastructure in place. We promote 3 FDA-approved products in the United States. So if we're able to get emergency use authorization, we have all the infrastructure in place in order to get the drug into the hands of hospitals. So we have a trade team available that has connections with distributors. We have a quality team in place, a compliance team in place. We have all the medical affairs team in place. We have all the core components we need so that if this drug is given that authorization, we really can take it all the way home to the hospitals and into the hands of patients.
And do you think these experiences, both for companies like yourselves and for governments and the FDA and regulators, do you think that'll speed up drug development and approvals in the future, even after the pandemic?
I hope so. I think one of the big challenges of drug development is just the time and the expense that it takes to take a drug from the beginning all the way through to approval. And there's always a balance between getting all the scientific and medical questions answered, and also keeping a regulatory path that is reasonable for drug companies to do. If it takes 50 years, nobody's going to develop drugs. On the other hand, we have to make sure that drugs are safe and efficacious. So there's a balance there. I think FDA does a very good job of trying to find that balance, and I think this pandemic has taught us that there might be ways to accelerate that. There might be ways to work faster, especially for drugs that are critical for public health and for patients in areas where there's a big unmet medical need. And hopefully that's something good that will come out of this drug development episode.
And COVID-19 is obviously an incredibly new field, and we're learning new things every day. But I'm interested to know how you see the overall field of COVID treatment developing in the near future. Are there any other approaches to treatment that we haven't discussed yet that might become important?
Yeah, nothing so far has proven itself. It's one of the big challenges around this virus is that there's been some success on the vaccine side, but on the therapeutic side, many companies have tried to use existing therapies or new therapies, and nothing has really worked. It's a very challenging, very tough virus, and antivirals in general is a very tough field for development. If you look at HIV drugs, it took us a decade to get drugs that work. So when you're talking about a compressed timeline of under a year now to be able to see something that works, we really have pushed ourselves to the limit. And as I mentioned, I think this is unfortunately a virus that's going to be around with us for a long time. So there will be many opportunities for people to try out different methods. What's imperative now is to get a drug that works better than what has been approved out there. And I think RedHill and opaganib is really at the forefront with probably the most promising drug near term in terms of data readout and a unique mechanism of action.
And going back to what we were discussing at the beginning, I assume that you see in the future how we will deal with COVID as a disease that's going to be with us for a long time will be a mix of vaccines and treatment.
Yeah, there's going to be a mix of vaccines, a mix of treatments, mix of new social norms, behavior, distancing. Unfortunately, I think this has changed us. It's not a short-term thing. I don't think anybody who's in the field believes that we're going to eradicate the virus anytime soon, if at all. So yeah, I think unfortunately vaccines is an area that's going to continually be worked on, as is therapeutics and as are other social distancing measures, masks, all the other things that we've unfortunately gotten used to.
Well, there's certainly some fantastic things there. I think we're all going to be keeping our eyes on in the near future. I think that's all we have time for, I'm afraid. But thank you so much again, Guy, for joining us. It's been really interesting.
Thank you very much for having me on.
And that concludes episode 31 of the pharmaphorum podcast and George Underwood's discussion with Guy Goldberg from RedHill Biopharma about new ways to treat COVID. You can find more details of this episode, including a download link for the podcast and information about other installments in the series at pharmaphorum.com/podcast. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Acast, Stitcher and Podbean, where you can find and subscribe to it by searching for pharmaphorum. And don't forget to visit our website to sign up for daily or weekly email pharmaceutical news and analysis bulletins, and follow us on Twitter, where we are at pharmaphorum.